There are two ways that I could look at the Nikon D750. On one hand, it's a lot like the D610 with some D810 sprinkled in. On the other hand, the screen moves around. Not quite like the D50-300, but not entirely differently either. If we look at the current Nikon FX lineup, D4S, D810, D750, D610, and DF, it's number 3 out of 5 in terms of positioning. What that listing doesn't tell you, though, is how all of those different capabilities work together. Before I delve into the D750, let's talk for a moment about the issue that has come to light with this camera. In some early bodies, there is an occurrence of irregular flare when the camera is pointed at a light source in a certain way. Nikon has offered to fix any bodies that need fixing, and they've gone so far as to take the D750 off store shelves for now, until they can get them repaired. Now, this isn't a problem unique to the D750 or even to Nikon. Other bodies have the same and even worse issue. Plus, it's probably something that most people wouldn't even run into. Possibly ever. In fact, I used the D750 for 3 days. I shot a ton, and I didn't encounter it. Again, Nikon cleared the shelves, fixed the issue, and will repair any body that exhibits the problem free of charge. So, with all of that being said, let's talk about what you have with the Nikon D750. You have a slim DSLR body with a deep grip. It's easy to hold and to shoot with. If you've shot with a D70-100 or D610, you're already familiar with the ergonomics and the overall layout. If you speak Nikon, you already know how to pick up and shoot the D750. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of good stuff here, but there's no radical changes to the way the camera works compared to previous models. Some people are looking for a brand new experience, revolutionary new features that bring game-changing capabilities and results. That's not what this is. What is it though? It's a full-frame camera that does a lot of things well. It does action, landscape, and portraits well. It inherits the autofocus capability from higher-end cameras, which is good. Very good. The D600 here in the SnapChick lab did a lot of hunting around for focus, as did the Nikon DF. Now, both of those cameras do produce crisp, great images in low light and higher ISO settings. The problem can become, though, that the camera can produce clean low light images, but it can't focus well in that same low light. And that can leave you high and dry in the toughest situations. The D750 fixes that. You'll be clicking off shots in low light while the camera is actually focusing in that same light. It's a pretty satisfying feeling, and it helps you get the shot. The next step is to combine that superior autofocus with very good frames per second for a full-frame camera. Short of the Nikon D4 and D3 series, this is the fastest full-frame Nikon available. The shutter is fast and quiet. Is it a replacement for the D4S? No, and it's not intended to be. But what this means is that this is a relatively compact full-frame DSLR body that can go seamlessly from portraits and landscape to wildlife and sports without missing a beat. That brings me to my overall thoughts on the D750. It's an all-arounder. You can take it anywhere, and it's not going to hold you back. It's going to do everything very well. To get to superb levels, you'd need to invest more in more narrowly focused cameras, like the D4S or D810. The D750 says, "Take me with you wherever you go, and we'll do good things together." While the D4S says, "Take me to the Winter Olympics." And the D810 says, "Take me landscape shooting and then into the studio." Another thing that's important to me is not having gear with me that is way too heavy and cumbersome. You may have recently seen one of my Grand Canyon hiking videos. For those excursions, I usually bring my little Nikon V1, but the D750 is a DSLR that you can bring with you for a long trek without too much trouble. We're all different, and I still bring my V1 with me wherever I go, but I can imagine that most people would want a lighter DSLR for an all-day excursion rather than something heavier. Let's look at some of the technical bits of the camera, look at some images, and then come back for the final word. The D750 is a compact body, but it doesn't lack buttons and dials for quick settings changes. It has the control scheme of the mid-level Nikon bodies with an exposure mode dial and several buttons on the back of the body that serve double duty, such as this one, which is the zoom out button while in playback, and when used in combination with the main command dial while shooting, will adjust your ISO sensitivity. Now, the control panel on this body is smaller than usual, showing you less information. However, you have the info display, which shows you lots of information on how the camera is set, so I didn't find it to be a hindrance. I should mention the tilt screen too. It can tilt up and down only, but it's a solidly built mechanism, which can be handy for high or low angle shooting, though some are concerned that it makes the body less weather sealed. The D750's menus are much the same as other current Nikon DSLRs, with lots of ways to customize how your D750 behaves. But there is the addition of a dedicated movie menu. And then to top it all off, you have built-in Wi-Fi, which means you can transfer files wirelessly or use the Nikon app on certain smartphones and tablets to turn your device into a remote monitor or to control the camera or even as a trigger. I had the D750 in the studio for a low-key shoot. I was not so surprised to see super crisp images at ISO 100, but I was impressed with its ability to focus in low light. I mentioned this earlier, but being able to quickly autofocus in low light situations is important enough to mention twice. To push the camera a bit, I took it to the Arizona Science Center. It's a great place for a test because there are so many different intricate things, all sorts of different lighting, and a lot of colors. I even shot at the highest ISO setting, High 2, which is the equivalent of ISO 51200. There is noise, but if I'm looking at getting the shot with this amount of grain or not getting the shot at all, I'd be confident in capturing it with the D750 all the way up the ISO range. The D750 did great when it came to color rendition, focusing in low light, and producing clean images, even at high ISO. In fact, the whole thing was a bit uneventful. It simply did what I asked. And when I wanted to rattle off a bunch of shots in sequence, it wasn't obtrusive. I love some of my older Nikons, but they can sound like an electric typewriter chattering away when the action speeds up. This one, not so much. There is one area of discussion that is unavoidable with the D750. It is viewed as the next incarnation of the venerable D700, based on the numbering scheme. The problem with this logic is that the control scheme is really more closely related to the D7100, D610, and the earlier D7000 and D90. Yes, the button layout is different than the D700, D800, D810, and D4S. This turns some people off, and I was also surprised that it was named the way that it is. But folks, Nikon makes their market, numbers, and positioning decisions. For me, I put the number aside and look at the camera for what it is. This is an FX camera that you can pick up and use right away if you're already familiar with the D7000 or D600 series. That's who this camera is positioned for, someone who is stepping up from a mid-range DX or lower-end FX body to a mid-range FX body. The body is presently $2,300 in the US, which is pricey, but compared to many FX offerings presently on the market, it represents a good value for the capabilities. Would the D750 be not so good for anyone? Well, this camera may not be for someone who has a D810 or D4 series camera and is looking for a second body. Personally, I like my second body to have a nearly identical control scheme as my primary. This is why I've stuck with the D800, now D810, and my trusty old D300S. Everything on both cameras is virtually in the same place. And if I'm shooting with two bodies and one has the higher end control layout and the other has the mid-range, I'm shifting gears each time I shift bodies. Can I do that? Sure. Do I want to? For me, no. But that may not be an issue for you. Regarding lenses, you've got a lot of choices here. Because of the high quality, high ISO images, variable aperture zooms are not out of the question. When the light is low and you have to shoot at f4.5 or f5.6 because of the lens you're using, you can still shoot with confidence. Like other FX cameras though, the D750 absolutely loves prime lenses, bringing amazingly sharp images which pack plenty of punch. In the end, like every other camera, it's all about you. Nikon makes the platform and then we each get to decide if it's something for us. I hear users telling me that the D750 really hits the sweet spot and they're pleased as punch with it. Others say that it's not really a step forward, or that the DSLR format and layout is becoming increasingly obsolete. One thing I like is options, and this is a very attractive option in the Nikon lineup. It takes some of the best features of the D610, adds some from the D810, and then brings a healthy dose of speed to the table. It's not a camera that changes the world, but it sends a message across the industry that the top capabilities can be integrated into a single, good handling camera without breaking the bank.